Okay, everyone, my clock shows about 2 o'clock, so we're going to go ahead and get started. This is Sierra circulation training. It's the second of two trainings that we're doing on circulation in Sierra. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Steve Heiser. I'm the Library Systems Administrator for MCFLS. And today we're just going to go walk through some of those areas in Sierra that will help you, I hope will get you ready to go on April 2nd. Before we get into that, I'd like to talk a little bit about how the meeting's going to go today. The meeting is going to last approximately 50 minutes depending on questions. And what I'd like to do is we're going to mute all the participants for the duration of the presentation and then send questions via the chat interface in your GoToMeeting window, which is on the right-hand side of your screen. So at the end of the session, we'll just take questions via chat. It's a little bit more organized, and you won't have people talking over each other. One of the other things I like to mention is that we're using a training server that Innovative has provided for us. It's not our CountyCAD server that we're going to be using on April 2nd. At the moment, our server's in a preview mode, as you probably know at this point, which restricts access to certain areas such as editing records, running notices, things like that. So this training server just gives us more access to the things you'll be able to see when we do go live on April 2nd. The session is being recorded. I have a bunch of online sessions that we've already done. Those are available in a couple of places. One is the continuing education section of www.mcflis.org. It's in the staff area. You have to log in as staff and then go to continuing education. You'll see a list of them there. Or if you prefer, you can just look up youtube.com and look for our channel. If you do a search in YouTube for MCFLS1, then you'll see all of the training videos listed there. They're all in public mode, so you'll be able to see them and view them wherever you want. So the goals for this training, they're the same for every session that we've done, and that is the primary goal is to give you what you need to know to be able to work with Sierra on April 2nd moving forward. I think the vast majority of you are not going to have a problem with this at all, and it's going to look very similar to what you're doing, which gets me to the secondary goal, which is to give you assurance that most of the functions work in exactly the same way as they do on Millennium. So you're not going to see too much of a difference. Regarding the timetable, our staff preview mode started last week Monday, March 3rd. And at that time, you should have been able to log into the system, check your functionality and your settings. If for whatever reason you're having problems logging in or you're not seeing something that should be there, please contact Kate Stratner at MCFLS. Her email is helpdesk@mcflis.org, or you can call her at 286-3520. She's handling all of the changes that need to be made to logins. She's been dealing with that for a while. While we're in this preview mode period from now up until April 2nd, you're not going to be able to see everything or make edits to records, as I mentioned before. It's more or less a way to look at the data and get comfortable with the interface. You'll be able to search against the database just as you would when we go live. So that's going to be unchanged, but a lot of the other functions that you may be used to doing, you won't be able to do. If you're prevented from doing certain operations, it's not because of your authorizations or permissions. It's just that everything is locked down for everyone, including myself, which is why we're using the training server. Two things I'd like you to check in preview mode if possible. One is check to see if your printers are working. Almost everyone's going to have access to a local printer and an email printer. We've added that for virtually everyone. If you don't see those or are not seeing something that you had in Millennium, please let us know. We can make those changes for you. One of the things you can do right now is to view a patron record and try to print it in Sierra. That should work on a LaserJet printer or whatever printer you're hooked up to, other than a receipt printer. You can also try that if you like. Be aware that your printer settings may need to change, particularly on the Format tab for local printers. It might be a little different than what you're currently doing right now. The other area I'd like to check is the area under Admin and Settings. So you get Admin and then Settings. If you use the macros, check that area. And by macros, I mean the F1 function keys. A lot of folks in circulation are using those. We put some pre-programmed ones in as well. Those have all been carried over from Millennium. They were exported in a big data load around January 20th when we went with the new server. So we'd like you to check those macros just to make sure that they're working. Lastly, with the timetable, April 2nd is our go live date. So the system will be unavailable the entire day, similar to January 20th. Offline circ will be available. On April 2nd, if you're using offline circ, we'd like you to use the Sierra version of offline circ. It's got a different icon for the desktop. There's really no difference between Sierra offline circ and Millennium offline circ other than the port number used. What we decided in order to reduce confusion as to what to do on April 2nd, that we would just provide you with a new, it looks like a new program. And I just sent those out to libraries that maintain their own computers today, so everyone should be getting it shortly. Okay, so before we get into actual circ functions here, I'm going to modify my chat window here. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the login process. It's a lot different than it has been in Millennium. So, depending on who you are, for the suburban staff, for example, this process is going to be much simplified. You will be using your staff initials, your personal staff initials, instead of the MC40 logins that you've been using in the past. Now, this may be different for your library depending on whether or not your library swaps initials at the service desk. So some libraries want to have greater control over who is logged in at what time, and in some cases you may need to have the functionality to swap initials, which means to set initials or clear initials like you do in Millennium. If that's the case at a service desk, for example, you will need to use a process similar to what we're doing in Millennium. But for the vast majority of suburban libraries, you will be logging in only with your staff initials. It's a one-step process. The process for MPL staff involves a process similar to Millennium, because many of the staff members at MPL neighborhood libraries will rotate to different branches. In order to set the location correctly, we need to be able to have you log in, set the location, and then you put in your personal initials to set your permissions. Okay, so here we are. This is the interface for Sierra. Looks a little different than what you may be looking at. I'm logged in here to look at the catalog first, but in most cases with your logins, you're going to be looking at circulation desk mode, so we can just go there right away. This is circ desk mode. Before we get into the circulation areas, I wanted to point out one area that's going to be very important for you. That is how to change your password here in Sierra. In the Millennium version, we were forced to use the SSH client, or the old blue screen version of CountyCat, to change our password. In Sierra, what you're going to do is go to the admin area at the top of the screen and then go to change password. And then you'll just put in your old password and type in the new password twice and hit OK. That's where you're going to be changing your password from here on out. So everything will be done in Sierra. The SSH client, or the old blue screen, Almost all those functions that are left in the blue screen are for people like me, the admin types, to do coding or certain functions that are not available in Sierra yet. But for the vast majority of staff people, you'll no longer need to use the SSH client to get to information that you need. If there's exceptions to that, I'll let you know. But for now, that's the route we're going to be going. We're going to leave everything on your desktop as it was prior to the migration on April 2nd, but eventually, within a month or so, we're going to remove Millennium and the SSH client. Okay, just a quick note about Sierra in terms of the layout. You'll notice here the biggest difference between Millennium and Sierra is the fact that it's a unified client. And by that I mean instead of having different modules for circulation, cataloging, serials, and acquisitions, you now have a drop-down menu labeled function, which allows you to choose all kinds of various functions to go to. So you don't have to open up a new module for serials check-in. It'll just be there, and it will skip right over to it, and then you can just do your serials check-in there if you like. Go back to circ desk mode, so on and so forth. So that's one of the biggest differences, one of the biggest positives I see with this client. So there's no more hopping between windows. On the other side of the screen here, you'll see File, Edit, View, Go, Tools, Admin, Reports, and Help. These areas are pretty much the same as they are in Millennium, with a couple of exceptions. First off, these are context sensitive, so for the most part you'll see the same commands or same settings options that you had in Millennium. For example, File, Select Printer, Standard Printer. All of these are identical to what you're using in Millennium. A couple of exceptions here though would be, for example, the Tools menu. This is context sensitive. So right now I'm in circulation desk mode. If I go to search holds mode, which is further down here, my Tools menu looks much different here, and I've got a new function that we'll talk about in a few minutes called Browse Query. It's a really neat function I think will help many of you with your day-to-day things. Also up here, and this will vary depending on what how your login is set up, but I think I've fixed this for all the Milwaukee Public Libraries. There's a reports area here that will allow you to look at the circulation activity reports. These are the new reports that we have for circulation, and also the old web management reports. So if you're used to getting your all activity reports, your hourly reports, this is where you would find that information under web management reports. So it's no longer in a little toolbar. For example, this thing down here, it's now available. It's going to be in this command menu line up here at the top. Just a couple of thoughts here also about the function menu. You'll notice that there's a lot in this list. They gave me everything when they set up this login, so I'm seeing everything here. Normally you're not going to see quite as much when we get going here, but these areas here that you see at the top where it says cataloging student, serials check-in, front desk circ, administration, these areas now are the equivalent of those modules that we used before, like circulation and acquisitions. See serials here, circulation, cataloging, acquisitions. Those are the equivalents of those modules. And then everything beneath them, you can consider those to be the equivalent of those buttons or modes that you would see in Millennium. So if we take a look at, for example, Millennium, I'll just bring up a Millennium window here. These buttons that you see here on the left-hand side correspond, for the most part, with those areas underneath each workflow. It's just a language change. The macros are different. By macros, I mean those function keys. The ones that they brought over from Millennium are pretty much the same, the ones that we have canned. I'll show you that here. Okay, so we're looking at the admin settings area of Sierra. There is an area here called macros that lists all the patterns that are mapped to your function keys. And everything that we've got for Alt, Control, Shift, all those modifiers have been brought over to Millennium. I'm sorry, brought over to Sierra. My fault. The only exception being the Go menu keys. A lot of folks had the regular F1, F2, F3 set up to go to certain circulation functions. But now, since everything is kind of put together into one client, we have to put in an extra step for those macros. So if we go to Go menu, we now have a circulation level that we have to deal with the macros. So this is how you would go to those other functions if you wanted to. Kate had to, well, myself too, we had to manually change those macros so that they went to the correct place. But if you're seeing something that doesn't look right, by all means let us know. We can correct it for you. As with Millennium, just because you see a function here at the top, this drop-down menu, does not mean that you have access to that function. So for example, your circ aids will not have access to your global update function, which would be a really bad idea. And that's the same way in Millennium. They could maybe see rapid update in circulation mode or circulation module, but they're not going to be able to do it unless they have the authorization to do so. And not many people do have that. The workflows here as well, as you can see, a lot of them are a little different. They have different labels to those. We can actually customize the workflows for your library. When we go live on April 2nd, we're going to keep everything as it is right now. But soon afterwards, probably about a week or so after, we'll start working with libraries to change the workflows so they make more sense. So that, for example, if your circ aids aren't seeing acquisitions or cataloging if they don't need it, and then we'll simplify it. But going live on April 2nd, we wanted to have as much available as possible. One of the really nice parts about Sierra, before we get into actually searching the database, is the fact that there will be no more locked or busied records, and in theory, no more broken holds. I'm hoping that that's the case. The way that the PostgreSQL database works is that it allows multiple edits at one time, kind of uses a buffer zone so that you can actually access a record, make a change, and then it just applies the changes in a sequence. So this will also mean that e-commerce patrons will no longer have problems paying during backups or when their record is open on Millennium, which had been a problem in the past, particularly the backups, because their record would be locked. And they wouldn't be able to make any payments on the database. Okay, so I'm going to do a real quick search here in the catalog. I'm going to go to search holds mode and just a little bit, give you a little bit of background about how the searching is going to work here. We do use the same indexes as before. This is a training database, so this has a little bit different look to the number of indices that we have access to. If we go to Millennium and do search holds mode, this is the actual index options that are going to be appearing for us. So it's not going to look like this, but it will be similar. So I just do a quick search for Inferno. This is where everything looks a little different. First off, your search results appear here in the center screen. This is their default view of search results here in Sierra. We have the option of choosing a different look to this, and I'll show you what that looks like in just a second, but I want to go through this default view. In a default view, it just gives you a little bit more information about each title. It shows you the indexed entry and why this particular result appears here, because it's related to this index search for Inferno. On the far right-hand side, there are two new columns. One is a summary column, which shows you the record number, whether or not there's at least one available item on the bib, and the type of records attached to the bib. So if we go down the list here, you'll see that there are some orders, there's items, nothing else on these particular records, but 4 bib holds on the second one. In the preview column, you'll see when we do go live, or within a few days after we go live, you'll see the book jackets appear in this preview area. So that's a default view for Sierra, and we can make a few changes to this. This icon that you see, this little eye with the circle around it, is everywhere in Sierra. If you mouse over this information or this icon, it will show you more information about the title, so that if you don't want to, you don't have to go into the full record to actually extract that information. You can actually just mouse over it and it'll show you. I've asked Innovative about whether or not we could change some of the information here, and at the moment it's kind of hard-coded, so it's using a lot of fixed field information and drawing that in as well. So, but everything's hard-coded at this point. The one other view I wanted to show you, let me just see if I can bring it up here. Okay, I don't know if you can see that clearly, but this is an example from the same database here, but it's using a more millennium-style index search result view that you may be more accustomed to or may prefer. I showed this to the reference librarians last week, and some of you may prefer this view instead of the one in Sierra that they have currently. So that's purely a matter of choice on your part as to whether or not you'd like to do that. For the service desk, we'll have to run that through, if you're using a generic login like your MC40. For Sierra, we'll have to talk about that a little further, but if you're just talking about your own individual logins, we can make the change for you. It's not very difficult at all. But this matches up more to what you would expect to see in Millennium, and maybe more conducive to getting, finding things. So we do a search here for so as you can see, that looks very similar to what we're currently looking at. So, and that's, instead of the arrows, you now have this, in Millennium, you now have this in Sierra. They just added the plus signs. It's really not that much different. Regardless of the view that you choose, either this default view or the more Millennium style, what they call a compact browse view, you will all have the list of facets here on the left-hand side of the page. So these facets match up very similar to what we're currently using in Encore. They're available in all workflows, not just the catalog search. For example, if you're doing a search for a patron name and there's more than one entry, you'll see the patron names listed here, and we'll actually take a look at that in a second. But it works very much the same way as Encore. If I wanted to limit to a specific branch or location, I just double click on it, and then my results are limited to that items from that location or titles from that location. And I can easily remove that limit by just clicking on the X next to it. One thing that is a little different, depending on what view you have, if we go back to the screenshot, you'll notice my facets are a little bit different In this view, I don't have the phrase facet group down here, and that's because those are grouped by the, take a look at that again. You can see that that matches up, these index entries match up with what we're seeing here in the phrase area. Okay, one other thing about the search interface is you'll notice that there is no limit button here at the top. Instead of the limit button, which is in Millennium, let's take a look at that again. See that limit with the hand button on it right here. Instead of that button, we now use the plus sign right next to the search button. So that will get you the identical type of limiting screen here. Now, whereas before, if you wanted to provide more than one limit on a, for example, material type, you would have to select from a checkbox. But in this mode, all you got to do is hit the plus button on the right-hand side for each limiter, and just add, for example, if you want to look at different maps, and just apply the limit just as you would in Millennium. So nothing's really different in terms of that, just how things are arranged a little bit. Okay, let's go into one of the records just quickly. I want to show you how that looks. You can see this in preview mode on our database, but I figure I'll show you what this looks like too. One of the things you'll see a lot of in Sierra versus Millennium is that the tabs that we have here, go back to Millennium here. See the tabs here at the top are summary, record number, item level, and bib level holds. Those have now been replaced in Sierra by buttons that are on the left-hand side of the screen. So the functionality is still the same. It's just the organization of information is a little different. And frankly, to me, this looks a little bit cleaner, a little bit easier to use. You'll see this in all kinds of records, not just bibliographic records. If we go into the full record display itself, as you can see, this looks very similar to what we're currently doing in Millennium. Not a whole lot of change. The organization of the information is a little different. Your tags are all here. I think they're organized a little bit better, particularly the indicators. For example, 245, 10, all that information's in its own slot, and it looks a little bit better organized. All the codes we have from our fixed length fields, for example, language, location, bib level, cat date, material type. They use bib code 3, but it's actually cat flag in our database. All that information is coming over, so all the coding and everything that comes with it, loan rules, locations, everything is coming over, and it's actually been brought over already into our database. So I just want to make sure you're aware of that. One other slight difference between Millennium and Sierra here is if we go back to this full record view, if I want to go back to the browse screen to look at other records, for example, my title search for Inferno, I would just click on Browse and it would bring me back to that list. So I just did that, and here we are. It doesn't get rid of my window, it just brings me back to that browse list. In Sierra, that browse button is over on the far left-hand side of the screen, so it's just located in a different spot. If I click on this, it brings me back to the same screen. Now, I'm in single window mode for my login, but if you are in multi-window mode like I am for this circulation login in Millennium, it will allow you to keep multiple windows open just like it does. So that functionality hasn't changed at all. Okay, before we get into the more specific circulation functions, I want to show you also a really cool tool that's new to Sierra that we don't have in Millennium called the Browse Query. So I'm going to close this out. And this function is generally only available in search holds mode or catalog mode if you have that access to that function as well. If you go to Tools and then Browse Query, it brings up on a window that looks exactly like a Create List search query window. In fact, it's pretty much the same. It doesn't look that much different. However, what's going on here is that it's only going to be looking at bringing up search results in this window, in this pane that we're in here. It's not saving the information. It doesn't allow you to save the information or export it. But what it will do is allow you to do a really quick search against the database for fields that aren't indexed. And by that I mean fields like the patron phone number or email address. If you want to do a quick search for that type of information in our current system, you have to go to Millennium, create a list, run it against the entire database, and it may take you maybe, 10 minutes, something like that, if not longer, depending on what your information is. In here, what I'm going to be doing is just doing a quick search for a patron phone number, searching against the entire range of records. Looking for a telephone number that has a certain set of digits. And the example I'm using here is of, for example, a patron that calls you, lets you know that they're not a member of our system. However, they keep getting phone calls for teleforms informing them that they have a hold to pick up at a particular library. Well, if you had to do that in Millennium, it would take 10 minutes for you to run a list to find that phone number because the information is not indexed. In this setup here, we just type in the phone number, and hopefully, yep, it brings it up here. This is the record I created for myself in their training database. But I could do a quick search also for a patron email address. And run that against the database, and it's instantaneous. There is no waiting. But as you can see, there really isn't any way to save off this information to the database. It's actually bringing it into a search results view, kind of like doing a search against the database for a title, and it's just bringing it into your search results so you can look at it quickly. Actually, you can go into the record by double-clicking on it. I hope. Yep, there it is. And actually making the changes and then saving them off. So it's a really neat tool. You can see the applications that might be there for you. But I used mostly a circulation example here, so hopefully that's helpful to see what you can do with it. But it's not just patron record information. You could do anything against an item record, patron record, information, bib, whatever you can think of. You can apply to that browse tool, which is really a neat little function. Like I said, it's really good for a quick search of information that's not indexed, but it's not great for really large result sets. It might take a little bit of a drain on the database. If you're wanting to save off the information, for example, export it to Excel or print it off, do anything like that, you're better off creating a list instead and then doing it that way. But you can do it in either way. But it's really good for a quick search of info. Okay, so for the remainder of the time here, I'd like to focus on the circulation functions. First off, I'm going to go to circulation desk mode up here at the top. And as you can see, those tabs that we have had in the past in circulation desk mode are now moved to these buttons here on the left-hand side. So it's just going to be a little bit of getting used to finding that information where it is right now here in Sierra. We do a quick search for myself. Use the same index, the name index, a barcode scan. Whatever you're doing now will work the same. I can close this out and I wanted to show you also what happens when you do Smith. That was about it. You do this really large name search. We're just looking for a lot of results here for Smith. But as you can see, that facet group for name appears here, and it will do the same thing in our Sierra database. So if we know it's Thelma Smith that we're after, we can just click on her name. And since there's only one of her, it brings it right into the display for her record, her full record. That's really the only facet group that appears there. Nothing really, other than name, that's the only thing that will appear there. Okay, so I've got the circulation desk view of my particular record. I believe this is the same as it is in Millennium, but it's hard to tell. But if you look at this area for fines, I put a manual fine on this record for a lost library card. It's kind of hard to see, but this is actually in red type. And if you mouse over or click on any of these areas, they turn kind of like a tan color, brown color. However, if I click on this one, it stays white for whatever reason. So it's just one indication that there's some kind of alert on that record that you need to be mindful of. Also in this view, we've had a lot of discussions with Innovative about what we can do with this display up here. This is their default view of the browse fields for the patron. Like right now, if I did a search, go back to Millennium here, circulation decimal, I can see how different this is. And by the way, the patron photos will appear in our database. They actually are in preview mode right now. That information will appear in the same area in this right-hand side of the screen where this eye is located. Okay, so if I take a look at my record here, you'll notice that I have a bunch of fields here that I can display. And we still have those custom fields available to us. However, we've noticed that there really is, if we're going with a custom display of fields here, there's really only 5 that display without a scroll bar. You can get a scroll bar to display in this area, and it will show you all the rest of your custom fields. But I think a lot of libraries want to see everything at once. So that's just something to keep in mind moving forward. I think after April 2nd, we'll be able to have a better idea of what we can do there. But there's a couple of different displays. One is just this information here with the email address without an address, and then one with the address. And then any custom display that you want to show will show the first 5 fields, just like they are here on the left-hand side of the screen, and anything else that you want added will display underneath it with a scroll bar. So the most important information you're probably going to want to have up top, name, barcode. Some libraries have already requested that the permission field be put in here instead of patron type. There's all kinds of different variations that you can use. One other thing that you may want to keep in mind here is this eye that's available here in this record. We'll show you a lot of information about the record, just like it does for the bibliographic titles. That information that they have here listed for my account is not something that we can change at the moment. These fields in our system are hard-coded in, but I'm hoping I can convince them to allow us to customize those. That, I think would be a reasonable expectation. Okay, so if we go and take a look at some of these tabs here, if we look at checked out items, I've checked out on one of these items already, so you can see the display looks very similar to what we're currently doing. Holds, I placed a hold on a title. This is actually from our reference session the other day. And I wanted to, before we move on to the next area here, is to actually go through the process of adding a hold to a record so you know what that looks like. It's identical to what we're doing in Millennium, very little difference. If I click on Add Holds, and I wanted to type in that Inferno search, and this brings up the bibliographic view of the record. Go ahead and place a hold copy return soonest. This number of holds area does not apply to us. It's a different setup. But I can choose the pickup location just like I can in Innovative Millennium. Page for title, and then it should disappear, and put the place the hold for that page on a bib level hold. I don't think I have any canceled holds. Okay, I do. All right, I canceled this one before, so the program here is now Sierra Desktop instead of Millennium Circulation. If we go to Finds, a lot of the same functions here are available here as they are in Millennium. I can add a charge if I'd like. Same window pops up. Go to Finds Paid. I don't have anything for Finds Paid, but you get the idea of what's going on here. A lot of the information is the same. We do, I'm going to close out of my record, and I want to take a look at some other functions you may be interested in. Second here is check-in on the list. This option for waive charges and items being checked in, I don't think is live in our system, but this looks identical to what you're currently doing in Millennium. We go to Notices mode. So this looks very similar to what we're currently doing in Millennium. We go there. As you can see, the tables look almost identical to what we're currently doing. We just have a lot more jobs listed here. And you can sort them by job name and so forth. We do have one paging list test for MICFLA, so I just kind of set up last week. So we can just prepare that, just show you what it looks like. Choose a local printer. And as you can see, a lot of this information looks almost identical to what we have. The tabs for notices, titles not sent, emails, those are all used to be tabs here at the top, but are now buttons here on the left-hand side. And if we go to View Outstanding Holds, this was View Holds in Millennium. It's now View Outstanding Holds, which it really was to begin with. We click on that, and if we select the pickup location, normally when you're logged in, your location served, for example, Franklin, Cirque, East, Cirque, whatever, is going to show up here, and that will be selected by default. And I can just look for everything that's on the hold shelf. Again, this really hasn't changed much. I was hoping that they would have improved this a little bit. Right now, there's really no good way to get this information out of this screen. If you print it, you're using like a ream of paper if you have anything more than like 100 items. But there are ways in which we should be able to get this information out of the database in the future, including using a SQL query to remove that, or not remove, but extract that information from the database. Okay, and one other area I just wanted to show you was fines paid. Okay, so this looks pretty much the same as it has before. Looks like there's only one fines paid on the database, which is pretty stunning. Being a training database, that makes a lot of sense, but you can look at all the information related to the fine. And look, that looks very similar to what we're currently doing. Okay, just a couple other notes before we wrap up here. The print templates will work the same as Millennium. That's one of these areas that you can check underneath admin settings. There is an area here for print templates, and you can check to see whether or not your library is using the correct template. Everything should have been brought over, but it could be something that we just missed, and we'll need to correct. So that's about it. I'll open it up for any questions that you have. And we'll try to address those if we can. If I can't address them now, then we'll do it at some other point as well. We do have 2 sessions on March 26th and 27th where you can ask any question that you like at a kind of like a town hall question meeting, I guess you call it. But in case something doesn't come up here, you can always do it at that point as well. Any questions? Okay. This is from Cudahy Family Library. Will macros from other modules, i.e. cataloging, come over as well? We've actually looked at that pretty closely. Whatever was in those modules, for example, and that's one of the things we really had to look at quite closely, because if you're merging settings from these modules like MC40 and MCAT, you got to make sure all those macros are accounted for. We've tried to merge as much as we possibly could. We've really put a focus on doing the circulation macros in first. However, all of those macro settings have been retained. The MCAT logins, the MC40s, we've kept those on the Sierra database so that if we do need to refer to them, we can just merge them at some point. But yeah, that's going to be something that you'll definitely want to take a look at, particularly if you're, got double duty with circ and cataloging serials or acquisitions. We've tried to merge as much as we could, if that makes sense. Any other questions? Okay, well, if no one has anything else, we'll wrap up today. But I'd like to thank you all for your time, and I appreciate your
patience and understanding through this whole process. It's a little bit of quite a change for all of us here. So I really appreciate it. And of course, if you have any other questions, feel free to let me know. Hope you have a great rest of the day, and thanks a lot for participating.